You know that voice in your head? The one that's been playing on a loop for, like, forever. It's familiar, right? Well, we're about to find out why that tape might be lying to you, and more importantly, how you can finally hit record on a brand new one. Okay, so let's just dive right in. What if that inner critic, that nagging feeling of doubt, what if it isn't actually you? Seriously, what if it's just an old kind of glitchy recording that you've been playing on autopilot for so long, you've totally forgotten you can even press stop? I mean, just thinking about that single idea could change absolutely everything. So, when we talk about these mental tapes, what are we actually talking about? Well, think of them as these neural highways in your brain, you know? They got carved out a long time ago from past experiences, maybe a parent who was super critical or a failure that really stung. They aren't facts. They're not who you are today. They're just the old, well-worn roads your brain takes out of habit. And here's the tricky part, right? These automatic thoughts, they feel so incredibly true. And why? Just because they're familiar. That path is so well traveled, your brain just zips down it without a second thought. But here's the real game changer. Those highways, they aren't permanent. You are not your recordings. So you're probably wondering, how is this kind of change even possible? Well, for a long, long time, we thought it wasn't. But then, a massive scientific breakthrough just completely rewrote everything we thought we knew about the human brain. So for most of the 20th century, the scientific consensus was that the adult brain was basically fixed, set in stone. Whatever wiring you had as a grown-up, that was it. You were stuck with it. Well, it turns out that could not have been more wrong. We now know our brains are constantly, dynamically rewiring themselves every single day of our lives. And this incredible ability, it has a name: neuroplasticity. What it means is that every single time you learn something new, or challenge an old belief, or even just think a different thought, you are physically changing the structure of your brain. You're literally building new connections in there. How cool is that? There's this famous saying in neuroscience that just sums it all up perfectly. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Basically, when you repeatedly think a certain thought or do a certain action, you're activating a set of neurons, and the connection between them gets stronger and stronger. And you guessed it, when you stop using a pathway, it gets weaker. It really is that simple. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. The proof is, it's just incredible. We're talking about real-world examples. We've seen stroke victims literally retrain entirely new parts of their brains to take over things like language. Or, get this, London taxi drivers. They have to memorize thousands and thousands of streets. And in the process, they physically grow the part of their brain responsible for spatial memory. And studies have shown that with mental training, people can reduce the activation of their brain's fear center by a staggering 30%. The evidence is just undeniable. So this brings us to the big million-dollar question, doesn't it? If our brains are these amazing, adaptable machines capable of such dramatic change, why does it feel so hard? Why do we keep playing the same old tapes over and over, year after year? Well, the answer is actually kind of simple and pretty profound. See, your brain doesn't know the difference between good practice and bad practice. It just gets better at whatever you repeat. So every time you worry about something, or replay an embarrassing moment in your head, or tell yourself you can't do it, you're doing a mental rep. You're not broken. You're just incredibly well practiced at thinking things you don't want to think anymore. Okay, so if we've been practicing the wrong things, how in the world do we start practicing the right ones? Let's get really practical here. There's a simple 3-step method, and it's backed by neuroscience that lets you consciously take the steering wheel of this whole rewiring process. It all comes down to these 3 things: interrupt, redirect, and repeat. Seriously, this is the blueprint for creating those new neural highways and letting the old, bumpy roads fade away. Let's break down each one. First things first, you have to catch that old tape while it's playing. The second you notice that familiar spiral of anxiety or self-criticism starting up, your job is not to fight it. It's just to notice it. And then give it a name. Like, oh, okay, there's the "I'm not good enough" tape again. In neuroscience, they call this affect labeling, and it's wild. Studies show that just naming an emotion can actually dial down its power over you. Now, this next part is crucial, and it's where most of us get it wrong. We try to just stop the negative thought. But you can't just delete a pathway in your brain, you know? You have to replace it. So the key is to immediately, and I mean like right away, shift your focus to a different thought. And not some fake, I'm a unicorn positive affirmation, but something that is genuinely true, something based on actual evidence. So for example, if the old tape is playing, I always mess up presentations, you redirect to the evidence. Actually, I'm getting better every single time I practice. Or if the tape says, nobody likes me, you redirect to the facts. You know what? I have proof of connection from my friends. You're not lying to yourself. You're just choosing to focus on a different part of the truth, a more complete one. And finally, we get to step 3. Repeat. And look, I'm not gonna lie, this is the hard part. But this is where the magic happens. Remember, you've spent years, maybe decades, paving that old 8-lane superhighway of negative thought. Your new thought? It's just a tiny little dirt trail in the woods. So what's the only way to turn that trail into your new default highway? Repetition, again and again and again. So we have to completely reframe how we see repetition. It's not a chore. It's the very tool that carves out these new pathways. The first time you do it, it's going to feel hard. The 10th time, a little easier. But by the 100th time you interrupt and redirect, it starts to become second nature. It starts to get automatic. You are literally actively building a new brain. So when you put all of this together, this powerful new perspective starts to click into place. You're not just a passive listener to your thoughts. You're not the audience. You are the programmer. You're the one in control. And if you're thinking, oh man, this is going to take a lifetime, think again. Studies on meditation, which, if you think about it, is basically the same practice of interrupting and redirecting, show measurable physical changes in the brain's structure in as little as 8 weeks. That's it. Just 2 months of consistent practice can start to build a whole new default setting for your mind. And that brings us to, really, the ultimate takeaway here. Your brain is going to change. That's not up for debate. It's happening right now, as we speak, rewiring itself based on whatever you're paying attention to. So the only real choice you have is whether you're going to be intentional about the direction of that change. So let's bring it all home. You are not those old recordings. Your identity is not defined by those automatic default patterns. No way. You are defined by what you choose to practice, starting right this second. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Your brain is plastic. It's adaptable. And it is listening intently to every single thing you do and think. It's just waiting for instructions. So the only question left is, what new song are you going to teach it to play?